Greetings and welcome back to another episode of Well, Why Not? As you noticed, with the first episode of season 4, I have now started to record video episodes, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and it's a goal of mine for this, definitely for this season and moving forward, at least to have a mix of audio and video episodes. But I will say that that first attempt was rough, and there were technical difficulties and a lot of learning, but I learn by doing, and I will continue to try, and hopefully the quality will get better, and I won't have so many issues when it comes to matching sound with the video, for instance. But in any case, today's episode, I wanted to talk about the allure of expatriation. And I know that it's something a lot of people are thinking about right now. When I say people, a lot of Americans. We're living in a very politically charged moment. And for some, it could feel very frustrating. It could feel overwhelming. Especially there are people who, for instance, were never interested in politics and never paid much attention, but now it's impossible to do that, or it feels like it's impossible because it's either you have been directly impacted by policies, or someone close to you has been impacted, or you're watching communities be impacted, and you may not agree with how they're being impacted and what those policies entail. So, of course, I'd say in recent months, probably since November, there has been an uptick in people searching for how-tos. What's an easy way, or what's the quickest way to expatriate? What's the best way to do it? And I feel like in previous episodes, I've kind of sliced up different facets or different phases of making the decision and actually executing. But today, I thought it was important to talk about how you cannot outrun yourself. And I know I've spoken about it before, but because of the increase in interest, and the increase is fueled by I'm not happy where I am, I'm frustrated by where I am, and so I think the best thing for me to do is to change my environment. And yes, I think that's where we all start when we start thinking about moving anywhere, even if it's from one city to another or one state to another. But definitely when it comes to moving from one country to another, I think it often begins with I don't think that I could thrive where I currently am, or I think I could do much better in another place. And something that I always like to mention is the work starts within, you as an individual, and finding peace and finding happiness within yourself. I think there's similar advice out there when it comes to relationships and finding healthy romantic relationships. Same thing. It's, you can't expect this new environment the same way you can't expect a partner to fill voids within you, or make you happy when you're inherently miserable. One thing I will say as a caveat, since I have spoken about this several times, and I've had the opportunity to participate in some forums and interviews talking about it, I have learned it sounds like a very simplistic way of putting expatriation, that, oh no, you can't outrun yourself if you're miserable, or if you're not happy where you are for external reasons. That's not enough. And I want to say that I know that there are situations and there are people who are fighting for their lives, and who feel that they cannot survive where they currently are. And in those cases, absolutely. I think making that immediate decision to relocate, even when you haven't done maybe all the work that is recommended to do, but if it is a matter of, whether it's your mental health that's really in a very difficult place, or you just fear for your safety, then in those cases, I would say this advice and all the things that I'm going to talk about are not as important. What's important is survival and getting to safety and being in a place where you feel that you can breathe. So that aside, I know that there's always this idea, the grass is green, right? So you see a lot of expats who have relocated to places that who seem to be just doing really well and have adapted and are, financially stable, who feel safe, who feel that they're part of a community that they didn't necessarily have back home. And yes, these are definitely possibilities. But again, they won't necessarily be if you are leaving before doing the work that's required individually. So I'll give you some examples, starting with, let's say you have a hard time with your immediate family or your friend group, and you don't feel supported, or you don't feel that you have been fully integrated, or that you kind of feel like an outsider. Whatever the challenges may be with with your family or with friends, I think the first thing, or the hard work that needs to be done, is figuring out why. And of course, some of the whys may not have anything to do with you. It may just be the dynamic of this group, or the dynamic of certain people that don't align with your own values, or how you would want to be treated. But that leads me to the most important piece. It's deciding how you want to be treated and setting the appropriate boundaries. Otherwise, I feel that if you're not able to do that wherever you are, you won't ever do it. And so, the toxic relationships or the toxic dynamics that you may have fell into, where you currently live, relocating doesn't mean that you've eliminated the potential of toxic people around. They're always around. And what's important is for you to figure out what your boundaries are, and to set those boundaries and learn how to maintain them. That way you will prevent that. And again, it doesn't mean that, oh, now that you set your boundaries, then I might as well stay. That's not, the idea of it. It's really just learning those healthy habits that will help support your journey wherever you are. So you will not fall into um, bad habits, let's say, that sometimes I think we don't recognize when we are in a situation where we're not completely happy. We look externally a lot as to, okay, well, if this person would just do this certain thing, or if my job would be this way. And that leads me to, the second example of your career. And sometimes it is a question of not feeling fulfilled in the work that you're doing, or not feeling happy within the company organization that you're working in. Or, sometimes it's more not feeling valued, or struggling financially sometimes. But I think that's a separate one that that I will also address. But first, when it comes to being happy within your career, and feeling fulfilled, and really, almost not seeing work as work, and fully enjoying it that way, that's, I don't want to say it's a unicorn, but that is hard to find. And I have learned, me personally, although I know that there are a lot of people out there who have found um, the ability to make money from their passions, and say, I don't feel like I work a day in my life and all that. I don't even, that's not even a goal for me, because I do recognize the importance of working, and that it's part of the human experience, that we work, we earn money to then help support uh, the other things that we want to do. I think it's also finding that balance, and knowing that I may not ever be 100% fulfilled by the work that I do, and that's okay. So for me, that was helpful. Kind of getting out of this mindset that by changing my environment, that I would then find or I already know what my passions are. I'm not confused about that, but find a way, I guess, to turn my passions into a business, or in a way to sustain me. Um, I don't, that's not personally a goal of mine, although I do recognize and see, and can appreciate people who have been able to do that. So once I took that pressure off of my job, and just knew that, and I have to also say, I love my job. I love the work that I do. I love the work that I've been doing for the 20 plus years. So that's helpful, but it does not mean that it's all roses and that I don't feel like it's worth it. And I think that perspective has helped me just to identify opportunities in a different way. I'm not looking for that perfect place because for me it doesn't exist. I know that there are always going to be challenges wherever I am. Um, every work environment has been unique. I've learned something new. I've challenged myself in different ways. And then there's another one. There's a new one. And it's more that that's the way I see my professional journey versus not working for an organization or within an institution that I don't own as a goal. That's not my goal. Now, if that is your goal, obviously, then there are things that you need to do to put those pieces in place, and there are a plethora of resources. I actually will link someone that I know, Christine Job, that I have had the pleasure of working with, speaking to, who I know helps people, specifically women, sort of create those pieces necessary, or just to make sure that they're aligned in order to become an entrepreneur while being abroad, because it is a very specific tactic. I think that that's necessary in order to thrive that way. There's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. Just like, I think being an entrepreneur anywhere you are, but specific, like let's say you want to be an entrepreneur in your hometown. I think there's a lot of work that goes into that, and figuring out the market, figuring out the demand, like how, all those pieces of having a business. If that is, like I said, your goal, figuring that out and understanding that. So then it's very clear to you that, okay, I'm not necessarily going to be looking for jobs working with an organization or a company. I'm going to be creating a business, and that's a very different path. But it's important to know which path you prefer and what it is. And so currently, if you're working for someone, and you're feeling frustration or whatever it is, figuring out which is it. Is it the environment? Is it that the leadership isn't great? Is it your coworkers are somewhat toxic? Or is it that you really, really would prefer to be an entrepreneur? So that, I also think is important internal work to do. Sometimes it's easy to just think, oh, I'm not happy in my job. I just need to not work for somebody. I need to be an entrepreneur. What I always say, and I've said this to my kids too, with entrepreneurship, I feel like you're always working for someone, even if you are not, you know, you're not getting a paycheck per se signed by someone else, as most people like to describe, the arrangement of working for someone. I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, you're beholden to your clients. So you're technically working for your clients. And it's never a situation, at least in order to be successful, where you just do whatever you want whenever you want. Absolutely, being an entrepreneur sometimes brings more flexibility than working within an entity or an institution. But I'm finding more and more that may not be the case always. I think certain organizations have become more flexible, especially with the rise of remote work, and just really understanding that as long as team members are getting their work done, there's no need to track their every move. Now, I know that's not the case in every industry, and some industries, for whatever reason, have not adopted that methodology or that sort of culture, but it does exist. It does exist. So sometimes, looking at, I have friends who are entrepreneurs. I feel that their burden is larger than mine, because yes, it can become, any job can become overwhelming at times, and you put in more hours. But I, at the end of the day, always know, like, I can just stop and then continue tomorrow. Whereas I think when you're an entrepreneur, and now not only are you, everything you do is impacting your ability to make money for your company. You have sometimes employees that are depending on you. You have your clients that are relying on you. There's a lot of pieces, right, that are burdening you. But again, that is personal or internal work that needs to be done before knowing for sure, oh, I'm going to move abroad, start my own company, and thrive. Now, the third thing that I do think is also very important is that financial piece. And I know I did feel like I've done several episodes about budgeting and ways to improve your financial literacy as well as just your financial stability. But I think when it comes to budget or the financial piece per se, I think a lot of Americans right now are feeling that, and that in some ways is a driver because again, they're seeing expats, American expats abroad using their dollars, stretching their dollars, and really showing lifestyles that in the US are for very wealthy people. And yes, that that is not it's uh, I don't want to say that, they're creating a false expectation or that what they're showing isn't true. It is true to an extent. But if you have not gotten or if you have not developed the skills to manage your finances in a healthy or in a good way, moving abroad isn't going to do it either. So, I'm sure there are um, ex expats, so Americans who expatriated and are now back to the U.S. Depending on where they expatriated, that will say, "Hey, it's not as cheap as you assume, just because you have the dollar, and it does usually go longer." But there are people who expatriate to Europe, for instance, and the euro. Um, if it's not equal for a long time, was a little bit valued a little bit higher than the US dollar. So not it's not that simple. I know when people show Latin American countries, a lot of Latin American countries as well as East Asian countries, that it looks like, oh, I can live like a king or I can live like a queen on a quarter of my income. And yes, but again, if you have not done the work necessary prior to get good spending habits, because you can easily fall into that trap. I'd say like one of the easiest traps that expats fall into is trying to. Okay, you obviously are coming into a situation where yes, your dollar goes farther, and you can pay for a lot of things. For instance, you can pay for someone to come clean your house every day, and it you know in some places it's not even $100 a month. But in addition to that, they will try to mimic or have certain items or continue certain habits that they had in the US. That's where a lot of times the money will start. You will be in a deficit if you're not careful, if you're not able to learn to adapt and forego certain luxuries that you had, and knowing that you're getting others in return. It's not that you have to, because the idea is to improve the quality of your life. So yes, it makes a lot of sense. But if you're not, again, being very mindful of how you're spending your money, which you should be doing wherever you are, and making sure that you are saving enough for any unexpected emergency. So I think all the tenets of financial literacy, when they talk about building your savings account, saving for retirement, all that shouldn't change, because now you can live off of a quarter of your income. And as a matter of fact, depending on the job or whatever professional activity that you're involved in for income, you may also be earning less, which is fine if you are able to manage your finances in a good way. So getting those not only those expectations, but again, doing that work and creating those healthy habits, whether it's your setting your boundaries with people so that you're not feeling taken advantage of, or you're not feeling that people around you don't value you, or figuring out really where you would thrive professionally, what you want to do with your career, what your career looks like. I think also something that I feel doesn't get talked about a whole lot is the ability to mix and match. I just was reading this morning about how, the choices we make are not set in stone. So you can work part time for a while and then go back full time. You can be an entrepreneur for a while and then go back to being an employee, or you can be an entrepreneur and an employee at the same time. I mean, there's just a lot of ways that you can configure what works best for you and what your needs are, um, what type of schedule that you would like to maintain, and then just overall what kind of lifestyle. And then, of course, like I said, the financial piece is just doing that work and getting out of a consumerism mentality, because I know, I know it sucks you in. I've been sucked in numerous times in the US, and as much as I try to be, and I just know that it's much easier for me to do abroad. Some people I have seen living in the US are able to live a frugal, still have a very good quality of life. They just have figured out um, systems for themselves that make it easier. But I am not above being influenced. So I see things, I see new things, I see somebody saying that this is a really great thing to have. I'm interested, and it's really hard to, for at least for me, to keep the good habit of not just consistently chasing the newest, latest, brightest thing um, while I'm living in the US. But those habits did start while I was living in the US. It was learning to not chase the newest TVs at the time. I have been now living abroad almost 15 years, actually almost 16 years. So it's so much easier for me to kind of recognize those triggers, let's say, for myself. But I know that when I was there, when I was living there, it was at the time, it wasn't even phones yet. I feel like smartphones hadn't gotten into this. Every year there's a new version. It was mostly like smart TVs that were just coming in, and other, trinkets. I mean, we had a computer, but even then I didn't feel the pressure that I see exists now of getting the newest gadget. And let's not talk about makeup and the beauty industry and how that's taken off. But anyways, that is, I would say those are my top three recommendations in terms of not trying to outrun yourself when it comes to expatriation. So I will probably continue this. I feel like there's just so much more to say about this topic, and there are some other areas that could be worked on, and should be worked on actually before making the decision, and making and getting on that journey and making sure that you're doing it in a healthy way. But like I said, for today, just hit those three, and that is all. And please share if you have any suggestions of your own or any questions. And until the next time, be well.